Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to this week's Real Talk. I hope you guys had great weeks. And I guess we can start off in prayer and then I can just kind of introduce like our inspiration for this night. So yeah, let's open in prayer. Dear God, I just thank you for bringing all these people here today to just really learn about the impacts of social media on our faith. I just pray that this time would be fruitful, that we would continue to grow more by tuning into your word and the ways that you work in us. And yeah, I just thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Nice. So I guess like our inspiration for this night, we realize like how big of an impact social media makes like on our lives, and how I guess like how much we use it, at least like our generation. And so yeah, we just wanted to focus on that and how that could shape the way that we either view other people or I guess like walk with the Lord. And so yeah, with that being said, I can just hand it off to Esther and we can start.
Hi guys, my name's Esther. Hi Pastor Eric. I am Isaac's sister, if you didn't know. Yeah, he's in the room next door. Oh, Pastor Eric didn't know. But yeah. So did everyone watch the documentary? Yeah. Yeah, so I've been in the social media field for about 4 years now, and I also watched the documentary, and I thought it was pretty eye-opening. A lot of my friends who saw it were like, I'm going to take a break from social media, or I'm going to delete my social media, which is fine. But as someone who works in social, I can't delete my social media accounts. But I can definitely see how the overall message of the documentary, how social media is designed to be addictive, and how if you're not paying for the products, then you are most likely the product, is an important takeaway from the documentary. And so if we can't avoid technology or social media, then how do we live with it and live with the awareness of how it's influencing our identity and the purposes behind our thoughts, behaviors, and actions? And so, I don't know, I feel like when you watch the documentary, it can seem a little exaggerated or extreme at some points, but it does really emphasize how social media influences you and your everyday life. And so we can just like dive right in. So I think social media is usually seen in two different ways. One is negative. So it can be seen as a negative impact to your mental health. It makes you compare yourself to others. So then that makes you insecure. It can make you jealous. It can make you bitter. Then there's the fear of missing out. You constantly,
Myrrh, thanks for the sub.
All right. But yeah, so it can give you the desire to have these like instant gratification, like that feeling. It can decrease your attention span. It also, there's studies that say it increases anxiety, suicidal rates, depression, loneliness, all those things. It's okay, Dishem. And the second view of social media can also be positive, which is that it's a positive resource. So it's a way for people to stay connected with friends and family. You can update each other, and then you can also quickly find news or trends. And honestly, I think every company or brand knows that they need social media to reach and market to their target audiences. They want to increase sales and make their products more accessible to purchase. And I think in the documentary, it talks about how the content we're served based on algorithms. We're influenced by those things, and eventually it affects the decisions we make, which then influence who we are, how we think, what we buy, etc. And so my first point I wanted to talk about is influence. Social influence is an umbrella term for the different outside factors that may cause an individual to think, believe, or act in a particular way. And so influences can be movies, TV shows, YouTubers we watch, Others can be our friends and family, people we hang out with. If you hang out with someone for like a prolonged time, we start talking like them, we start laughing like them, our facial expressions reflect theirs. Another influence could be music we listen to, books you read, sermons you listen to, or public figures you follow, or celebrities. And I believe that like influences create this chain reaction where if the influence itself is what we see or hear, then that affects our thoughts. And then our thoughts become actions. And then when you keep repeating those actions become habits. And then those habits become our lifestyle, which then become who we are. And so, for example, I was on a mission trip in Turkey 2 years ago, and there were these high school girls who were obsessed with BTS, and they listened to their music, they watched all their music videos, like tracked like all their TV shows they're on, and were constantly looking for new information about them. And so yeah, I could just like see how BTS was influencing their thoughts about Korean culture. They had these ideas of like what Korean boys were like and how they should look like, how they dress, how they talk. Like these girls were learning Korean. They were learning like the BTS dance moves, and like even were using Korean apps like Kakao. And so I felt like because they were constantly feeding their thoughts with BTS or Korean related content, their actions were changing. And these actions started becoming habits where they would constantly be on their phones to check for updates or latest news on BTS. And it was like a lifestyle for them. And although they were Turkish, they desperately wished to be Korean. Like they wanted to speak the language. They wanted to look like us and change who they are to be as close as they can be to this idol. And it actually like really saddened me to see how they wanted to change their identity and culture to be more like the person that they were being influenced by. And so that's why I believe influences are so powerful, because it can shape someone's thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, actions, even identity. And so to be honest, we are surrounded by many influences daily. And without awareness, we will mindlessly be influenced without knowing even if it's negative. And the only way we can change our thoughts is to have the right influences. And so I think a practical step would just to be try to be more aware of when you use social media and what you do on social media. And like, are you scrolling through reels? Are you scrolling through the explore page? Are you resharing resources for COVID or supporting small businesses? Do you usually use social media when you're bored or trying to avoid homework? So I think those things of being awareness of like how you're using social media can help you be more aware of like why you're using it. The second point I wanted to talk about is purpose. So social media was originally created to discover friends and grow networks. The idea was to safely meet more new people and communicate or share with each other across great distances. And however, the purpose of social media now has changed a lot, where its main purpose is to build an attractive brand. And these brands are trying to increase visibility and communicate with their customers. And so social media is mainly used to build relationships, provide information, showcase that this brand is interesting, creative, humorous, and then share updates, promotions, changes, successes. And these things I just described are relevant to companies or businesses, but I also think it's relevant to each of us as well. Through our personal accounts on social media, we're building a personal brand about us. And we are using our accounts to build relationships, new or old, through followers and interactions. We're providing information on the things that matter to us through the content we post or share. Through our content, we're shaping an image about what our personality is like, whether that's funny, serious, smart. And we share life updates to inform our friends and family all at once. And so this is where purpose of what we do on social media and why we're doing it matters. For the photo you're about to post, why does it matter to you? And what are you really trying to communicate about yourself? And for the photo you avoided pressing like on, or the photo you left a comment on, what are you really trying to communicate about yourself? I believe that the things we do on social media actually point back to the brand we are working on building about, and building about ourselves and what we're trying to communicate about ourselves to others. So for example, if you're a girl and you comment on every photo of every girlfriend that you follow, then maybe you're trying to communicate that every woman is worthy of being celebrated for their beauty and uniqueness, and that matters to you. Or if you reshare every Black Lives Matter resource you come across, you're trying to communicate that this community matters to you and you wish to help in whatever way you can. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but I'm just trying to emphasize how even the small actions we do on social have a purpose and meaning behind it. And so, yeah, we selectively show different sides of who we are to our followers. And a lot of thought usually goes into posting that one photo or writing that one caption. And I even have this app that lets you see what your feed is going to look like so I can plan out my posts and not ruin my aesthetic. But it takes a lot of time, to be honest. And I don't, like, you guys might be too young to know this, but when Instagram first started, the photos or content you saw were not that aesthetically pleasing. And like sometimes I miss those times when you just like post a photo of like a half-eaten burrito with really bad lighting, because I feel like that's what's genuine and what is truly considered an instant update rather than like the perfectly edited, eloquently written post. Yes, Minguk knows. But yeah, like social media has changed a lot now where we're like really trying to post the best of the best. And as we are building our personal brands on social media, I've also noticed this increase in accusations based on assumptions. And so people are more quickly jumping to conclusions without knowing the full story or picture about a person or a brand. And this creates misunderstandings or misconceptions about a person or a brand. For example, so I run all of the SPU social media accounts, and for orientation, I posted this photo of these two students. They didn't have their masks on. And then all of a sudden, this photo started getting a lot of criticism. And they were like, these students are a danger to campus, and, SPU is in danger now. They're reckless. And what people didn't know is that these two girls were roommates. And so they had already been sharing this space, and people didn't know that. So they just jumped to this assumption that they're just being reckless, not wearing a mask on campus, being a threat. So that's one example. Another example was when I was on a mission trip to Turkey, I only posted stories when we were taking a break from volunteering. And so people had this misconception that all we did was have fun and just go on tours to places. But what they didn't see is that when we were actually volunteering or working, we didn't have time to post Instagram stories or updates. And so there's that very limited perspective of what we show on social and what's actually going on. And I feel like ultimately, all of these things point back to one thing, which is our desire to be known. Whether it's the content we post or share, or even our desire to be the first to point out faults or accuse or misjudge others, it's ultimately our desire to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And if building our own brands is the social media norm, then as Christians, how do we stay relevant and trendy, but question and challenge the status quo? And what does it even look like, and why does it even matter? And I think it matters because the influences of social media are affecting the purpose behind our thoughts, behavior, actions, which are forming and shaping our identities. So the final section I wanted to talk about is identity. And this is really important to me because I myself have experienced insecurities, jealousy, comparison, FOMO due to social media. And I believe if we don't have a full understanding and confidence in our identities as sons and daughters of God, we will let people define who we are, and everything else will be misaligned, since it has to start with knowing who God is for who he is and knowing who we are as he sees us, because this influences every aspect of our lives, which is like work, school, relationships, serving, everything. And so, identity is something I struggled with all of my life. And even now it's something I continue to fight for. Before I met my lovely fiance, June, I think he's on this Zoom meeting. I was in a lot of like unhealthy and toxic relationships. I kept entering into these relationships where I was cheated on and I got manipulated multiple times, and it completely shattered my understanding of my worth and identity. And I felt like there was something wrong with me, or like I wasn't good enough, I wasn't pretty enough or cool enough. And I didn't understand why I kept giving my heart away to these boys who didn't know how to handle it with care. And during my junior year of college, I got hit with the realization that because I don't know my worth, I keep dating these guys who won't treat me the way I deserve because I don't even know what it looks like to be treated the way I deserve. And I grew this immense hunger to understand my identity as a daughter of God and how he sees me. And it took years to unravel and unlearn the lies about my identity that I had believed in. And the lies that I'm not worthy of love, that I'm not worthy of time, that I'm not worthy of good things, like all these things that I had built up over time. Like I really had to work through them to understand that I am worthy of these things. And in 2018, I was laid off from my first job out of college. And after that, I started job searching, and I was job searching for 9 months. I had just ended a toxic relationship, and I had all these goals and plans that I wanted to pursue, like moving out, living on my own, like traveling. And these things were actually influenced by the peers around me. I compared myself to how far along in their careers or education or life they were, and I wanted to catch up. The norm looked like having a full-time job at Amazon or a well-paying company, living in your own apartment, being in a healthy relationship. But all these things and all these doors just kept shutting on me. Like literally every job interview I did, I just kept getting rejected, like no matter what. And I would like make it to the final round and then I would get rejected. And so eventually I like attended this prayer and worship burn in Monroe at the YWAM base there. And that's when God called me to DTS, which is discipleship training school. And it really didn't make sense to me because 6 months of being hidden away in the mountains just to learn about God didn't sound appealing to me. And I was just like, why do I have to go to this place to learn about God when I can just learn about him at home? But eventually through different situations, God just continued to convict me. And then I committed to the season of hiddenness with God, where although I was separated and distanced from my daily norms and my community, God began revealing and healing these deeper hurts and insecurities and how I had been truly viewing God through this time, and how that actually directly influenced how I viewed my own worth and identity. And it's then when I realized that nothing matters if we don't have this understanding of who God is and who he has called us to be first before anything. Because if we don't have this understanding, majors, jobs, money, status, titles, talents, and relationships, that's what's going to define us rather than the simple truth that we are loved. And without any of those things, we are still loved. And so yeah, social media, it makes us compare our lives with others. And when we see that we're not in the same pace or season, we feel like there's something wrong with us and we need to fix something, that we must not be as special or gifted as that other person who just got into their major or internship. But that's not true. God has a different plan for each of us. And until we surrender our plans, our understanding, our logic, our reasoning, and our control, we will be forcing ourselves into a season, revelation, conviction that's not ours. And when we walk into God's provision for us, everything falls into place. And we have this peace knowing that even if it doesn't make sense, God is still good. And therefore we can trust him and where he leads us. And this is the power of knowing who God is and knowing who he has called you to be. The influence of our Father who knows you inside out, not a social media platform built on algorithms to construct a new attractive reality that distracts and redefines you to fit a mold. And I'll wrap up with this. In Romans 12:2, it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And if we are constantly being influenced by things around us, whether we're aware of it or not, then how do we renew our minds to think more like Christ and be more like Christ? The only way we can change our thought is to have the right influence, such as the Bible, prayer, friends who love Jesus, wise godly counsel, etc. And if we have different values and we want to change the things coming out of us, it goes back to renewing our mind. It has to start inwardly. And we need to change our thinking through repentance, through our influences, thoughts are formed and thoughts become the actions of our lives. And then those repeated actions become the habit of our lives. And then those habits become our lifestyle, which becomes who we are. And this is not behavior modification, which is short-lived, but a transformation of heart and completely turning away from what we once believed and how we once lived. But I believe as Christians, we have the choice to challenge the norm of how social media is used or how it influences us, the attention we give to our influences, evaluate the purposes behind the content we post and why we're posting it, and fight to let only God define our identity and not people or algorithms. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. That's so good. Yeah, we actually got like a lot of questions, so I'm excited to see how the Q&A will go. But yeah, we could hand it off to Pastor Eric now.
Esther, thank you so much for sharing. That was awesome. Yeah, I think I think this is going to be repeat. Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. Well, yeah, hey, thanks for having me here, guys. So glad that I can just share some stuff with you guys. If you don't know who I am, I think most of you guys are familiar with me, but if you don't know who I am, I'm Eric. I'm the interim lead pastor at New Life Fellowship, and I don't know if you guys know, but for the last, I would say about probably starting from about 2011. So it's been about 9 years now. I did college ministry all the way up until like just a year and a half ago. And so, my heart is still with collegiate students. My younger brother is actually a senior in college right now. He's at Pepperdine, and he's about 14 and a half years younger than I am. And so all that to say, like, my heart is just still with you guys, and it's my heart beats for you guys. I'm still passionate about like what happens to you guys and how you guys are thinking and feeling about things and how the Spirit is leading you. And um, so here's what I want to do tonight is, some of you guys just watched the film, so it's really fresh on your minds. Some of you guys maybe watched it a while ago, but what I want to do tonight is kind of give you guys some Bible, give you guys some scripture, give you guys some theology to kind of undergird some of the stuff that's being said in the documentary. And hopefully it's helpful for you guys. But so let me start off by reading from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. And I'm going to take a little bit of a tangent, but I'll come full circle to what I really want to talk about here. So, Esther kind of referenced this in her talk about how she said the quote was, some of the guys in her life didn't know how to handle her heart with care. I love that phrase that you used. And but yeah, Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 says this: keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Let me read that verse one more time. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. If you look at that word vigilance, that word in the Hebrew actually means like keep. It's like to keep again. So he's kind of saying like, keep your heart with all like keeping. So he's kind of like saying it again. That's why the ESV translates it as vigilance, right? It's like he's kind of using that word twice, but that word vigilance more often is translated as prison. So he's saying, look, like keep your heart and basically imprison your heart. That's how much you should be guarding it. Like put it in a case so that no one can touch it because that's how important it is, because from everything from there flows, right? The NIV, it kind of puts it like this, right? The NIV says, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Like everything, like what you do is not an accident, right? Your behaviors are not an accident. So if you're anxious, that's not an accident. That's flowing from your heart. If you're bitter, if you're fearful, if you're angry or lazy or dispassionate about life, right? But conversely, like positive things, right? If you're charitable, loving, joyful, these types of things, right? It's all flowing from your heart. And so all of this stuff is not just random, right? It actually flows from your heart. So discipleship, right? When we think about this word discipleship, when Pastor Minguk is trying to disciple you, when I'm preaching to you on Sundays, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to your hearts. Because if I can get to your hearts, if the Spirit of God can get to your heart, if the Word of God can get to your heart, we can actually transform you. We can actually disciple you deeper, right? And so when I preach to you on Sundays, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get your head, then I'm trying to get your emotions. Because in sort of the Hebrew context or the ancient world, the heart wasn't just your base of feelings. It was also your logic. It was the center of your logic and your feelings. So when I preach to you, I'm trying to get your mind and your heart at the same time, your emotions. And more specifically, when I preach to you, what I want you guys to see is Christ, right? First Corinthians, I believe it's 2:12 says, or 2:2, he says, right, for I preach Christ and him crucified. Like that's all Paul wants to preach. And that's all I want to preach too, is I want to give you guys Christ, and I want Christ to be in your hearts. I want him to be in your head, in your emotions, and let everything you do flow from that, right? And so this, right, requires me to capture your attention. I have to get your attention. If I don't have your attention, I don't have your hearts. And this is what I think Solomon is talking about. He's saying, like, pay attention to what you pay attention to. You have to pay attention to that. And so, you know, if you read the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 6:4, there's a famous, passage there. It's called the Shema, and it's called the Shema because that first word here in the Hebrew is Shema, right? So they're saying, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength," right? And what he's saying there, here, is he's saying, pay attention. Pay attention. All throughout the Old Testament, right? If you read Isaiah, right? He says in Isaiah 6:10, right? He says, make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and turn and be healed. Do you hear what Isaiah is saying? He's saying, look, don't let them pay attention, because if they pay attention, they'll actually be saved. So like, don't let them pay attention, right? But this idea of attention, right? It's everything for discipleship. If you don't pay attention to the words of God, if you don't pay attention, then there's no way the church can actually disciple you. There's no way the Spirit can disciple you, right? And so that's why for me, like I try to go shorter. I don't know if you guys know, but we have like two pastors. I created like a team of pastors to kind of, give me feedback on my sermons. And one of the things they told me almost every week is, hey, you go for too long, like you're preaching too long, so shorten it, because people can't pay attention for 45 to 55 minutes, right? You got to make it 30 minutes because that's all people can do, right? I try to make the sermons interesting, relevant to your lives, because I want you to pay attention, right? And it's because I want to shape your, right? And this is something that Esther talked about, right? Your identity. I want to shape your identity, which then moves into your behaviors. And so I want to shape your lives and your identity around Christ, and from that, right? When we understand we're saved, we're loved, we're sinners, but yet we're saints. All of that flows from there, right? A type of people, right? A faithful people, a charitable people, kind, right? So now, okay. I just talked about Christian discipleship now. Now I want to flip that, okay? On the flip side, okay, I don't really throw around his name too much. If you guys follow my sermons, I don't really throw this name around too much, but Satan has a discipleship program too, right? Satan wants to disciple you. And I honestly believe that social media is one of the tools that Satan is using to disciple you. And that's what he's doing. That's what he's doing with social media. He's discipling you in his ways. Just as the church has a program for discipleship, I believe Satan has a program for discipleship. And right now in the culture, he's winning. Now, I'm not saying he's more powerful than God, but the reality is he's winning, right? If you guys remember in the temptations of Jesus, right, Matthew chapter 4, Satan takes Jesus to this high place and he says, look, if you, he showed him all the kingdoms of the world. And he said, look, if you bow down to me, I'll give you all of this, right? Meaning that to some regard, Satan kind of owns this world right now. He does. There's some truth to that. Not that he's more powerful than God, but he does, right? And these social media companies are controlling you through manipulation. right? You should be controlled by the spirit, but you're being controlled by an algorithm. You're being controlled by a robot who cares nothing about you, right? Social media is discipling you. Supercomputers are discipling you more than the church, more than the spirit, more than the words of God. And so, look, like, I'll be honest with you, and I'm not saying this to brag, but this is honest to God. Like, I love you guys. And, for the last month or so, I've been fasting and praying for the college ministry, for New Life Fellowship. Like, every Fridays, I would just fast and I would just take that day to pray. And I love you guys. And look, my heart aches for you, but if you won't listen to a pastor who loves you, but you listen to a social media company that doesn't care jack diddly squat about you, because think about it, Mark Zuckerberg, he don't care about you. He don't care anything about you. He cares about padding his mansion. He has a nice big mansion. He probably has Ferraris. He probably has all this stuff, right? Like he doesn't care about you. And yet you will listen to essentially Mark Zuckerberg's over the church. And so what I want to say is this, right? The Holy Spirit wants to control you, right? And so you have to ask yourself, what does the Holy Spirit want from me today? Not an algorithm, because that's what the algorithm is trying to do. It's trying to get you to do things, right? Scroll, 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 scroll. What does the Holy Spirit want from me today? Not the algorithm. We need to be plugged into the Spirit, not our phones, okay? So the way, and Esther kind of touched upon this, but the way, I wanted to kind of point out really two ways that I think social media is discipling you, right? The first way is by shaping your worldview, right? And this is what I'm trying to do in my sermons, actually, is I'm actually trying to shape your worldview, how you actually perceive the world, right? Am I a sinner? Are people lost, right? This is a perspective that you see the world from. And what I think social media does, and what it does really well, is it shapes your worldview. And the way it does this, right, is by what they talked about in the social dilemma film, which is by giving you these over-exaggerated pieces of truth. Right? They want the algorithm just wants to feed you this crazy stuff over and over again because it wants you to stay glued to the screen, just look at it and not take your eyes off of it, right? So you just keep watching. And so it just feeds you the crazy stuff, not the true stuff. It doesn't care whether it's true or not, but they'll feed you the crazy stuff, and the crazy stuff is influencing you. It's shaping your worldview, right? And so the way in which social media companies will grasp your attention is by feeding you crazy, extreme stuff. So let me kind of like give you guys an example of how this works, right? And I'm sure you guys already know this, right? But I'm going to say something, and it's for the purposes of illustrating this, right? I'm about to say something crazy, in other words, because this is real talk, right? So we can talk real, right? I'm about to say something crazy, okay? Like about 6 years ago, I almost got into a fist fight. Okay, that's kind of crazy, right? About 6 years ago, I was actually still a pastor. I was playing basketball. Almost got into another fight with a pastor, right? Because it just got heated. I was tired, right? Kind of crazy. But now let's elevate that, right? Let's elevate that craziness a little bit more. What if I said this, right? I really enjoy having sex with my wife. Boom, right? Attention flared up, right? Oh, pastor just talked about having sex with his wife, right? Oh, crazy, right? The more and more crazy, the more and more extreme something is, the more and more it floods your emotions, and the more it captures your attention. And so you can kind of see this in headlines too, right? In news headlines. I just picked out a few of them, right? But even like I love the New York Times. I think they're doing a lot of objective journalism, but even the New York Times, what they're trying to do now in their headlines is they want to create clickbait for you, right? So you click it. And so they'll tell you how to feel about this news article versus just telling you the facts now. And this is something, I'm not even that old, I'm 35, but this is something that I've seen change over time. I'm a New York Times subscriber. So I've seen this change over time, right? I'll give you some examples, right? Talking about COVID, right? They had this headline. It's terrifying, right? It's terrifying is in quotation. Somebody said it, right? It's terrifying. Millions more out of work. Do you know who said it's terrifying? It was an event planner in North Hollywood. It wasn't even like somebody important. It was an event planner, right? But they put it's terrifying because they're trying to get you to feel something. They said, I believe it was the Daily Mail, they had this headline: "It feels like a war zone. As more of them die, grocery workers increasingly fear showing up at work." Here's another one, right? "Horrifying simulation reveals the dangers of jogging during the coronavirus pandemic." Here's another one from the Times, right? "Braced for apocalyptic surge, New York avoids worst so far." And this was an article about how New York was actually doing better, but they're talking apocalypse is coming for coronavirus, right? Let me give you some examples of some news articles that came out years ago, okay? When the World Trade Centers were hit, this was the news article. This was the title of the news article, right? They're just telling you the facts now, okay? If you notice in the ones I just stated, it's all about how you should feel about this news article, right? But when the trade towers were hit, this was the headlines: U.S. attacked, hijacked jets destroyed Twin Towers and hit Pentagon in day of terror. Right? They're just kind of sharing the facts with you. L.A. Times: terrorist attack, New York, Pentagon. That was the headline. When the Titanic sank, okay, this was the headline for the Titanic. Titanic sinks 4 after hitting iceberg. 866 rescued by Carpathia, probably 1,250 perish. Is May safe? Mrs. Astor maybe, noted names missing. That's the headline. They were trying to stick to the facts. But modern news articles now are trying to tell you how to feel about a news article so that you click on it. And as the movie tells you, the algorithm doesn't care about how this thing influences you or affects you emotionally or physically, or right, because at the end of the day, this information is not something you want, it's something it's feeding to you. And so here's what I was thinking about. I was thinking about, how do you decipher, right, if this news article or this video that you're about to watch or whatever it's pushing into you, how do you know if it's true, untrue, helpful, or unhelpful, right? And again, I don't have all the answers. I'm not sure if this is like 100% sound, but this is just some ideas that I had, okay? The first thing is, do your investigations. Don't believe everything you read or hear on social media. Just don't just because now this politics says it, just because the Daily Mail says it, just because, don't take it at face value, do some investigation, right? I think the second thing is this though, make sure you're hearing more from God, right? Than more than the feed social media is pushing to you. And so this means limiting social media, right? Upping the amount of time that you actually sit in silence with the word. Because here's the thing, right? The Bible wants to give you wisdom, right? That's what this thing is trying to do, right? The Bible wants to give you wisdom. And Jesus, for example, is called Logos, right? The word, logic, reason. He wants to give, and Jesus Christ is wisdom embodied. And if you want wisdom to be able to discern and decipher between what's true and untrue, well, you've got to sit under the word. You've got to allow it to penetrate your mind, your heart, your bodies, right? And so that's one thing I would just say, right, is just sit more under the word than you do in social media. Here's the second thing I'd say is, ask yourself if all of this stuff that you're ingesting from social media is creating fear, anxiety, worry, anger, bitterness towards another group of people with a different political ideology. I don't know if you guys know this, right? Galatians 5. Everyone knows the fruits of the spirits, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, right? I don't know if you know, there's right before Galatians 5:22, this is what I call the crap of Satan, okay? Fruits of the spirit, crap of Satan, okay? There's literally a list of crap that Satan will put into your heart. And so if you would, it's sort of the fruits of Satan, right? And this is what Paul says. It's in verse 19. He says this: now the works of the flesh are evident. So he's saying this is the fruit of Satan now, okay? He says sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. And so, here's what I'm trying to say. Is this social media stuff producing the craps of Satan versus the fruits of the spirit? Does that make sense? Because if it's producing all this fear, anxiety, dissension, rivalry, anger, if it makes you lust, if it wants to make you party, I don't know what, right? If it's causing you to move towards evil, then maybe stop watching and ingesting that stuff. So let me give you some examples, right? Let's take something like Black Lives Matter, okay? There was a lot of good that came out of it, right? And there were definitely lots of posts on Instagram that caused people to open up their eyes to racial inequality, right? Things that Esther had mentioned, right? People were able to see, their eyes were opened up to systemic racism, and caused people to work for injustice. So that's a fruit of the spirit, right? That's something good that comes out of it, right? But then there were posts that would demonize the other side, whether you were for Black Lives Matter or not for it, right? For example, I saw footage of white people with Southern accents, right? Who appeared to be uneducated, that were chanting Blue Lives Matter, right? All lives matter. They were also holding American flags, and they were not wearing any masks. They weren't social distancing, and that really caused people, right, to hate anyone that said Blue Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, or didn't agree with it, or it made people believe that all people who believe All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter are like this, right? Ignorant, non-maskers, right? This kind of stuff, right? And then the vice is true. The flip side is true, right? There were posts demonizing people who also were a part or supported the Black Lives Matter movement, right? I saw a video of a man interviewing people who were part of the Black Lives Matter like protests. And I remember him going up to these people, trying to debate with them, and he would ask them things like, hey, like, do you know what systemic racism is? And the people marching wouldn't be able to give him a clear answer. And so he'd be like, yeah, see, look, you don't really know what it is, right? And a video like that, right, is basically what they're trying to show is that, okay, look at the people who are supporting this, right? They don't really know what they're doing. And so you see what I mean? This content is being pushed to you, whether you're on the left or the right, and it's causing you to feel this anger, vitriol, bitterness towards the other side, whether you're on the left or the right. And so again, like it's good to be informed. It's good that social media pushes forward and just, helps push forward fighting against injustice. But is this material causing you to be bitter, angry, create rivalries, dissensions, all of that stuff, right? Okay, so that's the worldview, okay? I think the second thing that social media shapes you or disciples you in is not just your worldview, but it also disciples you in your identity. This is something that Esther talked about, right? I just want to read a quote to you guys, okay? I think it's fairly easy to kind of understand, right? I had some charts, but you know what? Actually, you know what? Forget about the quote. Let me just kind of explain the quote to you, okay? Or let me just read the first part of the quote, right? He says this. This is a guy named Jonathan Haidt. He was featured on the Social Dilemma, Social Dilemma. And he's a professor at NYU. He's, I believe he's a neuropsychologist, and specifically in moral behavior. I read one of his books called, oh shoot, I forgot the name of the book, but brilliant guy, brilliant. Anyhow, this is what he says in an interview. He said, boys have more antisocial behavior, okay, alcoholism, crime, and violence, okay? So he said boys have a lot of antisocial behavior, alcoholism, crime, and violence, but he says for girls, it's called an internalizing disorder, right? Girls basically make themselves miserable, boys make other people miserable, right? So that's the kind of the main difference between how boys and girls kind of handle, and he's using these terms boys and girls because he's talking literally about young boys and young girls, right? 12, 13-year-olds, okay? And basically what he shows is that if you look at the rates of suicide and depression and all these things, right? If you look from like 2005, right? If this is 2005, it's sort of like flat all the way up until about 2010. Okay, imagine this finger is 2010, this is 2005. It's sort of flat line for girls, okay? Starting at 2010, it starts to go like this. Rates of depression, rates of suicide, rates of all this stuff start to skyrocket. I forget, one of them was like 175% it goes up. Not only that, but the rates of girls cutting themselves and hospitalizing themselves because they cut themselves also went up like this. It's like a BMX bike ramp, just goes straight through the roof. And he basically says that the leading cause for this change in his mind is social media. And the reason why is because if you look at what happens in our culture, right? Facebook comes out, I believe, 2006, 2005 maybe. And then iPhones come out, I think 2007, 2008. But both Facebook and iPhones don't get popular until about 2010. 2010, 2011, about 50% of all middle school girls and boys have an iPhone and Facebook as well. And so that's why you see starting at 2010, boom, it starts to fly up. And so he says there's really three reasons why he thinks that this has caused primarily girls actually to suffer in identity loss, right? He says that, first, if you look at the nature of aggression within the sexes, right? He says boys are more physical in their bullying. Okay, so for example, boys, if I want to bully Daniel, right, I'll just beat him up, right? I'll call him names and then I'll beat him up, right? And if he wants to bully Tim, he's just going to call Tim names and bully him, right? And so if you give a boy an iPhone and Facebook, what they're going to do is, and this is what he says basically they're just going to play video games and watch porn. That's what they're going to do with the iPhone, right? But if you look at girls, girls are actually just as aggressive as boys, except their bullying is relational. They won't go and fight you. They won't punch you in the face. Although, I mean, of course, there is some aggression like that. I'm not saying that it's devoid of within girls, but their main area of aggression is relational and social. And so because of this, they bully each other by damaging other girls' social relationships, spreading rumors, spreading lies, spreading a doctored photograph, saying bad things about the other girl, excluding them from friendships. It's relational aggression, and it's always been really hard to be a middle school girl. But add the iPhone, add Facebook, add social media, and you just made it 10 times harder to be a middle school girl. And then beginning around the second thing he talks about is social comparison, and this is something Esther talked about as well, right? It's always hard being a teenage girl with emerging beauty standards, right? You see, these girls on the cover of Vogue magazine or, whatever, Sports Illustrated. You see all these girls in these advertisements and they're so perfect and picturesque and there's no blemishes, no flaws. They're so skinny, so beautiful, right? But then you add the iPhone and Facebook and beauty filters into the mix. And what all of a sudden you have is you have your very own friends, girls that you know who look like this now. They look like supermodels now because they can do the filters. They can make their lips bigger. They can make their eyes bigger. They can make their skin nice. And so they post these pictures and then you look at them and then you look at yourself and you're like, wow, like I'm ugly. Like, why would any person want me? And so they're really comparing themselves against this unrealistic expectations of even their own friends now. And then probably the biggest single one, right? This is the third thing, is he says it's the fear of missing out, the fear of being left out. And all kids are subject to this, right? This isn't just for girls, this is for guys as well. But girls are much more sensitive to this, he says. And so suddenly when everybody is tracking everyone, right? Who was invited, who's there, who was in the picture, who wasn't in the picture, and then on top of that, when a girl puts something out there, posts maybe a picture of themselves or maybe an invitation, but they're waiting to see what people say and they don't get quite the feedback that they want. All of this stuff is really, really damaging, especially for females. And so I'm mentioning this because I am particularly concerned about social media, especially when it comes to females. This stuff for me is personally very, very raw and something that something that I'm just one of the reasons why I wanted Pastor Mingo to why I kind of wanted Pastor Mingo to have all of you guys watch this film is because of this. It's probably been about 3 or 4 weeks now, but my cousin, she's a college student, she's a freshman, but she's in that place. I remember when I was living in California, she was in high school at that time, and she couldn't deal with a lot of the social pressures that were happening because of social media. And it wasn't only that, there was a bunch of other things, but she tried to commit suicide. And I remember finding her in her car. She had taken a whole bottle of sleeping pills to try to kill herself. And I remember having to find her in her car. And I had to take her to the hospital. They had to, basically they had to basically pump her stomach full of this medication and so this stuff for me hits home. And then like 3 weeks ago, I get a call from my mom, and basically she's tried to kill herself again, and she was successful this time. And so, for me, this stuff hits really, really close to home. I don't know how many of you are dealing with depression. I don't know how many of you are dealing with suicidal thoughts or harming yourself or any of this stuff, but this stuff is not something this is not just a, little, okay, it's harmless. Like, it's just like this thing for me, this is dangerous to me. This is dangerous when I see what it's doing to our culture, to our society, and to our people, because it's not just a theory, right? It's actually affecting people's lives here. And the people who created this stuff, they don't care about you. They don't care about you. So I know that was a lot. But I think Esther asked a really, really good question. How am I supposed to relate to this stuff now, right? Like, what are you trying to say, Eric? Like, just cancel it all out, like, like burn my phone, like, but I do want to note, like, and I think Esther did a really good job of this, of just painting some of the positive stuff of social media. There are a lot of benefits to it. For example, we've been able to spread the gospel because of social media. We've been able to bring further social causes like Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement. This was all possible because of social media, bringing awareness, connecting people in new ways, bringing out people's creativity. Because, sometimes I look at people's Instagram accounts and I'm like, wow, they're just so creative when it comes to entertaining and building out certain things and whatnot. So here's just some of my thoughts. Okay, this isn't like gospel. In the sense of like, this isn't like, I'm not saying this is it, right? But this is just some of my running thoughts, because I don't think, as it stands right now, that I have a comprehensive idea of how to get rid of all of this stuff and how to like deal with social media. This is just some of my thoughts. Okay. The first one is, if you look at Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 to 23, Paul says this, right? He says, put off your old self, okay, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires, and to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. Okay, let me kind of like paraphrase that, right? What he's saying is this, right? Take off the old clothes. Okay, you have dirty clothes on, take it off, then put on new clothes. Okay, because the old clothes are dirty, they're stinky, they're smelling. New clothes are brand new, beautiful, right? And so in Ephesians chapter 5, or sorry, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 28, he gives us an example of this, right? He says this, let the thief no longer steal, but let him labor doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need, right? So he's saying, first of all, like, don't let the thief steal, right? Take off that stealing habit, put on new clothes, work hard. Take off stealing, put on, right? So that's sort of the paradigm by which I think the Bible gives us for kind of handling certain behaviors, right? Take off and then add, okay? And I believe this is the gospel, right? The gospel tells us that Christ took away the sting of death, right? He took away your sins. He took off that old clothing. He took away your dirty clothing, right? He took away your sins. He forgave you. And then on top of forgiving you, he didn't just leave you forgiven. He gave you something else, right? He put onto you his righteousness. He put onto you this clothing. And I believe that this model for removing and replacing is maybe how we can deal with some of the social media stuff, right? So maybe the first thing is to minimize, maybe not to get rid of, but to minimize social media, right? And this is some of the things that they talked about at the end of the movie, right? They talked about turning off your notifications, don't check, so I've actually done that on my phone. I turned off all of my notifications for Instagram, Facebook, and email, and anything else really. I turned off all my notifications. So actually sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh shoot, like and I'll open up my Instagram and there's like, however many messages there. And I'm like, oh shoot, sorry, I didn't get back to you, I don't check my phone when I'm working, when I'm preparing sermons. I leave my phone downstairs. When I'm praying or doing my quiet times, I leave my phone downstairs. When I'm going to bed, when I'm, even when I wake up in the morning, although waking up in the morning, that's the hardest one. But when I go to bed, I don't look at my phone before I go to bed. I leave it downstairs. But when I wake up in the morning, I'll try not to do this, but some days I'll do it, but I'll try not to check my phone as the first thing. I was listening to a podcast where they said, hey, why don't you try to step outside and just like connect yourself with God's creation first? Just take a step outside your door and just like breathe in the air before checking your phone, and then another thing that I recently heard that I'm actually going to probably start doing very soon is actually Tristan Harris, the guy who speaks in the documentary. I was listening to a podcast where he was on it, and he says that he takes a Sabbath from digital devices once every week. And so that's something that I'm personally going to try to do myself, is I'm going to take a Sabbath from as many electronic things as possible. My computer, my iPad, my phone. And of course, you still need it, right, to message people. People need a message. So maybe like Messenger, things like that, I'll keep on. But on that, like those days, I'm just going to take a complete like technology Sabbath, right? Because we have to guard our hearts. You have to guard your attention. You have to guard how much you're giving these things attention so that Satan doesn't have an opportunity to disciple you through social media. And then I would say this, right? Replace it, minimize social media, but then replace it. Give your things. And this is something Esther talked about, right? Give your attention to the things that really matter, that bring you life. Replace it with Bible reading and prayer. Like, honestly, I'll be honest, even as a pastor, even though I read the Bible pretty much every day, it's still hard. I'm like, it's boring. Prayer, you have to sit there and wait for the Holy Spirit to help you to pray. But and I was reflecting on it. I mean, your generation grew up with just tons and tons of technology. At least for me, like I grew up in an age where we're still analog with a lot of things, we didn't have all this stuff. So, but even for me, with all of this technology, it's hard for me to just sit and be silent. And I don't know how much harder it is for you guys, but I'm assuming that it must be much harder to just quiet your mind and to just sit and to listen to the Spirit, to what he's speaking to you. So that's one thing to replace it with. The other is to replace it with meaningful relationships. One thing that I heard recently was that social media has given us the ability to have lots and lots of relationships, right? Something Esther mentioned, right? Lots and lots of relationships. But all of those relationships are shallow. Like they only go down like this much. Very, very shallow. It's all about topics, right? Maybe we get along with somebody because they have the same makeup person that they like, or because this person follows the same video gamer or something, but it's very shallow. But what happens is it takes away from actually deep, meaningful relationships, physical, personal ones. And so I would say, man, pour into the relationships here at ConXion. Like really pour into them. Like just be like, hey man, I want to go deep with you, brother. I want to go deep with you, sister, well, sister to sister, but you get the point, right? And then here's the last thing that I would say. Don't use social media for yourself. Try not to use it for yourself to, as Esther was talking about building your brand, right? And of course there is some of that you will be doing, but for the most part, try to redirect your focus when you use social media. Try not to use it for yourself, but try to find creative ways to use it for good. Instead of using social media to receive affirmation, maybe use it to encourage others, right? And bless others. And those types of things, right? So try to find ways to point social media outwards so you can bless others, okay? Last thing I'll say is just this: unplugging from the matrix is hard, right? Unplugging from the matrix is hard. I don't know if you guys have watched The Matrix. Have you guys ever watched The Matrix? Have you guys watched it? You guys may be too young. 1999. Have you guys watched it? Okay. Well, there's a scene, and I think I talked about this in one of my sermons, but Neo's first unplugged from the Matrix. He sees the real world. The real world sucks compared to virtual reality and or compared to the AI world. And he finally realizes what the real world is like. And then he like gets so like discombobulated that he ends up throwing up. and Neo goes up to him afterwards and says, you know, we don't usually unplug people when they're this old because they just can't handle reality anymore. And I'm guessing that, you know, go back and watch that movie because it's really interesting. But I'm guessing that some of this process of minimizing and replacing is going to feel like that. It's going to feel like, oh my gosh, this is the real world. This is what reality is like. And you might even throw up in the middle of it, you know, because it's so agonizing and so hard. But look, this is why Christ died for you. Christ died for you so you could be free, not so you could be controlled. You're free in Christ, you know? You're free from bondage. You're free from anything controlling you. You don't have to have that in your life to control you. Christ has freed you. And so live that way. Live a free life. Do what you want to do. Don't do the thing that the algorithm tells you to do. Okay, well, that's it. Sorry, I think I went a little bit long. Apologies. Hey, but if you give a preacher some time to talk, I'm going to talk for a long time. So, but yeah, I'll hand it back over to Ashley. I think that's what, and we're going to do some Q&A.
Oh, yeah, I think Hemi's actually going to lead the Q&A. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, we have a few questions. We actually received a few questions, like a good number of them from some people, but I think we only have time for a few. But the questions that we aren't able to answer today, we will probably try to answer another time, whether that be through like a post or something. But we will like forward that to you. I think we could take a 2 to 3 minute break for right now to like regather, so we can like send the questions out to both Esther and Pastor Eric, and then we can like brainstorm some answers too. And yeah, we'll go into the Q&A section. Maybe we could re-meet at like 8:46. Works for everyone. Okay, a question for Esther is, oh yeah, is everyone ready? By the way, sorry. Yeah, I think a question for Esther that we have is, what have you found as a female to be negative influences?
Great question. I think for me, like honestly, physical appearance is a huge one just because as a woman, like everything that's advertised is to be like desirable, and like the definition of desirable is like being super skinny or like super fit, having a certain look, or like the way you dress. And I think it's something that I've struggled with, like even since like middle school, and just like wanting to be trendy or different or liked and accepted. And like, I don't know about you guys, but like during COVID, there were like the Chloe team workouts, or like Kayla's like BBG workouts and stuff. And it's like when you see these influencers and like all these people like hopping on the trend of like trying these workouts and then like losing weight like that, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like that's not me. Like, and I forget like that everyone's body is different and not one workout is going to work for everyone. But I think when you see like what Pastor Eric mentioned, like it's your peers, it's like normal people that is able to like, I don't know, like look like a supermodel and like look like a celebrity and things like that, it starts affecting you like, oh, like if a normal person like them can do it, then why can't I? And so I think that's been a negative influence. And like another one, I think this is like pretty real, but when you see like your boyfriend's ex-girlfriend's social media, like I think that's a negative influence, because then even that you're like comparing like, oh, like what does she have that I don't? Or like, why did he like her? Like, I don't know. It's just like those thoughts that even like make you question your worth of like, and just make you start comparing like this and that. Like, what does she have? Like, what do I have? And I think those are not celebrating the person's uniqueness, but it's just comparing and like being jealous of what the other person has that you don't.
Thank you for answering. That was a good answer. I think for Pastor Eric, another question that we have is, How do you advise us as a community to keep each other accountable with social media?
You know, I don't know. That's a tough one. I think one thing is just call each other more and hang out. Like I know during COVID that's a little bit tough and whatnot. But I think like if we ever go back to normal or whatever, like, but just try to do like I don't know how you guys are hanging out. Actually, I don't have the faintest idea about how you guys are hanging out during this time. You know, but if you guys are hanging out through Discord or through, by the way, I just found out what this whole Discord thing is. I didn't even know this thing existed. I don't even know what it still is, actually. I just know that it's kind of like Slack, and we use Slack in our church. Um, but yeah, I think maybe just trying to hang out with each other more somehow, and just really being there physically for each other. You know, putting your phones aside, putting down social media as the main way that you guys interact with each other or to interact with the world, but just having more relationship with each other. Um, I think, yeah, there's other ways. I mean, if you guys want to build accountability groups and like where you guys, you know, I was actually going to ask you guys at the beginning of the talk, like, hey, like I was going to, you know, but then I was like, oh, it's too much. You know, it'll put you guys on blast. But like, hey, like, you know, put your, I don't know if you guys can see this, but you know, every phone now has how much screen time, right, that you actually use. I think iPhones definitely have it. I think Android has it as well. But right, it tells you how much screen time you used and how much of it went to YouTube and Instagram and all this stuff, right? And just like share that with each other, and and so that you know you guys are limiting how much you guys are actually using. But I don't know. I don't know. This is where I think you guys know your lives better. You guys know your context better, and you guys. I think there are brilliant, creative ways that things that you guys can think of. Your generation. One of the things that I appreciate about it so much is you guys are so creative. You guys are way more creative than you know 40 or 50 year olds that I know. Like just some of the things that you guys like, especially when I like venture like because I don't have TikTok, but I see like TikTok stuff every day. I'm like, dang, this is crazy. This is so creative. This is so good. So I think yeah, just putting your creative juices to some of these things would actually be helpful as well.
Thank you for the input. Esther, what are some practices you use to build a stronger foundation in your identity? And how would you describe your identity now?
These questions are like, wow. But to build a stronger foundation, I think that honestly comes as a natural outcome of knowing who God is. And I remember when I first was like so curious to build my identity, I read the book of Ephesians because I literally just like Googled like what's a book on identity and Ephesians came up. And so I remember like just eating that up and I was just like, oh my gosh, Ephesians is my book. And I would spend like 2 hours in my closet praying just because like I just desperately wanted to be with God. And I'm not saying like you guys need to sit in your closet for 2 hours, but like for me, it started with just having that hunger and desire to first know like how God viewed me and also to like know who God is, like really who God is. And I really tried to read and pray, engage with God in like every day, like just driving, like, hey God, like how's it going? And I don't know. I don't think there's like any other way to build a stronger foundation than with spending time with God, because you can't build a strong foundation or build intimacy instantly. It takes time. And when it's like when you get to know someone like a person, you see them every day, you talk to them every day, you get to see how that person loves you and cares for you. And it's through those small steps, like every single day, that you eventually get to a place of trust and confidence with that person. And I feel like that's the same with our relationship with God, and our identity is from God. And so it starts with God and it starts with abiding in him and like building that intimacy with him. That is where our foundation of identity will come from. And I think the other question was, how do I describe my identity now? I'm not really sure how to answer this one, but like when people ask me like, how would you describe your relationship with Jesus? I just say like, I think the one word is a fighter, because I fight to believe the truth over the lies. I fight to overcome weaknesses. I'm constantly fighting to keep moving forward and to continue to fight to magnify God in my life over these distractions or like things that I want to put my focus on that's not God. And so I think like I can't really say like, oh, my identity is like super confident and like I'm awesome, but I can say that I'm a fighter who doesn't give up, because like I know that the fact that I'm here today and like the fact that I've come this far is because of God. So I know that it'll be worth it if I continue to fight. And so yeah.
Yeah, if I could add something, to something you said initially, Esther, like I really appreciate the answer of like just reading and praying, because that's not like, that's not like a sexy answer, right? Like, oh, like, we kind of want these like these 5 steps to like, reimagining your identity or something. But I appreciated your answer, because sometimes the most helpful things in life are the simplest things. Like it's not the shiny thing, right? It's like, yeah, read and pray. Like that's what you should be doing. It's like if somebody asked me like, hey, why do you love your wife? And I would say, well, because I love her. Like I just can't imagine my life without her. Like, yeah, I could list off a bunch of qualities, but at the end of the day, I don't love my wife because of those qualities. I love her because I love her. Like there's just something about our bond and our connection that goes deeper than words. And it's just simple. And yeah, that's why I appreciate that answer. Like it's just, hey, like yeah, you've gotta spend time with the Lord. Like that's how you find your identity, So yeah.
Wow, that was really powerful. Thank you both. Pastor Eric, how can we properly involve and glorify God through our social media?
Yeah, I think I tried to detail some of those things out towards the end of my talk. I think definitely not allowing social media to control you, but for you to really control it. I think, using social media not for yourself, but trying to find ways to use it for other people, to really encourage and to love other people. Um, um, yeah, and also I think using social media to, yeah, actually no, those would be the two things. I'm not. I think for me, like I have to leave it at those two things, because I think when it comes to the details of social media, like this is where I'm a little ancient. Like I don't really know too much about the details of social media. So, um, like even like I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on some other things, and I don't even play video games. I don't have like a video game set or anything like that. So, um, yeah, that's where I think for you guys figuring out the specifics of how that works, it's something that you guys have to do. But I'll say this, like if you guys put yourself to that task of finding out how you can really encourage others through social media, how you can use social media for encouraging and blessing others, and if you guys put that to task, you guys will grow, because it's sort of like digging, right? If you're building your own house, you're using muscles, right? You're like using your muscle to put up the wall and to do all this stuff. And I think if you build, if you put to task your mind to like really figuring out ways to be creative in this, I think you guys can really grow from it, in terms of applying the gospel to your life.
Thank you for that. Esther, what is a personal story for you that social media has played a positive and negative impact on your life?
I think I think social media is a great way to find resources and save memories, and that's been the case for me. Like I really like posting for the sake of memories, and whether it's like a revelation that I like really fought for with God, or just a moment in my life that I wanted to capture. Also, I think positive, like it's a great inspiration for creativity. Like when I'm in a creativity slump, I'll just scroll through other photographers that I follow, just to get inspiration. And another one is like fundraisers. When I needed to raise money for DTS and like my mission trip, I used social media to share my story, and I was able to raise the funds for my mission trip. And I think it's also a great way to create events or group gatherings. Like I feel like Facebook is just used for groups and events now, but I think those are some positive ways that it's impacted my life. And negative is honestly like it does take up a lot of my time. Like when Pastor Eric was talking about screen, like the how much time you spend on it, I was like, oh, I don't want to show mine because yeah, it's a lot of time. And I like bought books for when COVID started, and I've like started 3 but haven't finished any. And I tend to use social media when I want to avoid, or there's like I kind of like want to escape reality, and I just kind of want to like do something mindlessly and just numb my mind. And so I think that's a way that it's been negative, because yeah, I'm not engaging with something that could actually help me. Like what I like to say is when I just like went through something like hard, I like push it off to spend time with God, even though I know that spending time with God will like be the cure, because I just want to like sit in that like I don't know feeling of like yeah, I don't know what it is, but I just like mindlessly just would rather scroll through Instagram and like avoid it for as long as I can. But I think there's like if there was a cure that like a medicine that could cure cancer, like why would you wait like to take it, you know, like you would take it now. And so I think that's the same with like God. But yeah, negative is like so much time, and it's like numbing.
Thank you for being honest and sharing that too. Yeah, Pastor Eric, I think one is that how do you know when you are guarding your heart too much or too little? What is the line?
Man, that's a tough question. I don't know. Um, I want to say for for females, I just my gut instinct, and maybe I should think through this a little bit more, is to just say like, I don't think as a female you could guard your heart enough. I don't know if you guys were my daughters, and if I had a daughter, I think I would tell her to live the way my wife lived, which is she guarded her heart even against even when we were dating. She guarded her heart a lot against me, and it frustrated me honestly because I'm like one of those guys who just I'm like I want to go deep fast. Like I want to like let's get married after 3 months. Like that was my thing, you know. I was like I love you. Like let's just get this thing done, you know. Um, but my wife and even her family, I noticed they took time. They were like, hey, like we need to still get to know you. We've still got to find out who you are. Yeah, of course, you're in ministry, but there are evil people in ministry. We don't know. So, and even though at the time for me it was frustrating, I look back now and I just saw a lot of wisdom in my wife from really guarding her heart. Um, I guess when it comes to relationships, like in terms of like friendships, of course you don't want to guard it to the point where you're, being standoffish, right? Where you're, but I think the point just being that, yeah, actually, I don't know. I have to think about it a little bit more. Yeah, because how much do you risk versus how much do you, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know. Um, I do think though that, when it comes to friendships, though, there is definitely some risk that you have to take, right, in order to step out and invite people into your home or to invite people into friendship. So there is risk there. And that's where you need the gospel. That's where you need Christ to really heal your heart and to give you an identity so you're firm enough. Yeah, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but yeah, just some of my ramblings.
I think that answered the question pretty well. Yeah, thank you for that. Esther, I think another question is that in what ways was social media toxic to you when you're going through a breakup?
Wow, real talk. We're going deep. I mean, I think it's a natural temptation to want to know like how the other person is doing, or like how like what they're up to right after a breakup. And so honestly, it's pretty toxic if like you didn't mute that person's stories or posts or unfollowed them, because I don't know, like I feel like it's just a natural tendency to want to check and like I feel like for girls, like what they do like after breakup is you want to show them that your life is so great without them that you'll start posting things like even though you like naturally wouldn't if you guys were still together, like you would start posting things like with your friends, like out with other guys, like hey, like my life's going great without you kind of thing. But even that is like, what are you trying to promote about yourself? And so yeah, I just think like they say like love, like if you were to compare it to a drug, like if you were to cut off that drug like cold turkey, then you're going to have withdrawals. And if you keep giving yourself like small doses, like then you're not going to help rewire your brain to know that you don't need it anymore. And I think it's the same with social media. Like after a breakup, if you keep exposing yourself to that person's stories or content and posts, like what they're doing, who they're hanging out with, then you're not helping yourself rewire your brain to know that like you're not together anymore and you don't need that person like right now. And so I think, yeah, in those ways it's toxic because it's not helping you move on unless you're like psychologically just that strong. But I think most of us are like not that strong. And so yeah, I think it's just best to hide or unfollow their updates at least until you're in a better state so that you stop exposing yourself to them and like even the curiosity of knowing like what they're doing.
That's very real. Thank you for that. Pastor Eric, in topics of anger, what if a social media post causes me to be angry for the injustices and makes me hate certain people more? How should I process this? For example, people who hate BLM.
Man, these are such good questions. I mean, I think one of the things that I try to do personally, not with the BLM thing particularly, but just, you know, as a kind of broad general understanding of this question, right? Like, I think one of the things that I try to do is I just try to remember that these people are made in the image of God. And when you understand that, what you begin to see is that each person's life is not just some image on a screen or just some, you know, picture in a profile, but rather this person is worth more than all the gold, all the silver, all of the diamonds and rubies in this entire world. Like, even if you were to gather all the resources of this world, anybody who believes that everyone's made in the image of God has to believe that this person is worth more than all of the gold, rubies, diamonds. And I think that's one of the things you have to continuously remember and remind yourself of, because when you, especially when you get into a place of bitterness and anger, what you oftentimes will do is you'll dehumanize, literally dehumanize. You'll make them not human, subhuman. And in your mind, you'll make them out to be a caricature. You'll make them out to be something else besides human. But that's where you have to remind yourself of their humanity all the more. That just as you're a sinner, they're a sinner. Just as you're flawed, they're flawed. And all the things that make you a human are what make them human as well. And so that would be one thing that I would just really focus in on, because that actually brings me that actually really does bring my level down. I'm like, oh, wait a second, like they have a mother, they have a father, they had an upbringing, you know, and so just really remembering that they're human.
Thank you. Yeah, Esther, what were some of the specific lies that you believed about your identity, and how did you overcome some of them?
I think the biggest one was that I'm not worthy of love and no one will love me just the way that I am. Like I felt like I always had to achieve something or be like the perfect daughter or be like the perfect friend or girlfriend to be loved. And I think yeah, one of the ways that I overcame that honestly was that I went to therapy because at one point I was just like, man, I feel so angry and sad and like bad about myself all the time. And usually I'm able to figure it out with God. But at this point in my life, I was just like, I feel like I don't even know why I feel this way anymore. And like, I don't know if it's even worth it anymore, like worth living. And so I think I just like needed to understand that what I say, what I do, who I am matters, and there's no one else like me. And I feel like for so long I had suppressed like my needs, my wants to accommodate others, that I had lost sense of who I am and like what my real identity is. And I just remember like there was this song by I think it was Maverick City or Stephanie Gretzinger, and it just says you are good and I am loved. And that word loved, when I was reading the lyrics, loved was capitalized. And for me, that moment was just so like, oh my gosh, so simple, but like it hit me and convicted me that like loved is not just the word, but loved is my name. Like when I introduce myself, I say, hi, my name's Esther. And that's just so matter of fact. But like when I saw loved with the capital L, it was just like matter of fact. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not, you are loved. Like whether like it's just matter of fact. And so I feel like I had to come to that point where I had to realize like what I have to say, what I do, who I am, it matters. When I try to talk to someone, I felt like very like insecure, like, oh, I don't want to hurt this person's feeling. But eventually I had to come to a point where I'm just like, if this person truly says that they care for me and they love me, then they will listen, then they will try to change so that we can work in this relationship, because they care, because they love me. And if they don't, then it's like, is it really worth my time to try to invest into this person that is not willing to hear me out when I'm saying like you're hurting me and like this is why I feel this way and I'm insecure. And so I think yeah, it eventually I came to a point where I was able to understand like, oh, like what I do say, what I do, it does matter. And matter of fact, like I am loved even if I don't feel like it. Like emotions, like it doesn't matter. Like I am loved. And like I just had to like not associate my worth with emotions. Yeah.
Oh, preach it. That's so good. So good.
That's really good. Yeah, thank you for that. Pastor Eric, I think this is the last question for you. Is social media is filled with deceit and manipulation. It seems like a very shaky place to be. So shouldn't I completely cut it off?
I mean, you can. That's up to you. I think one of the beautiful yet difficult things about the Christian life is, one of the like smack dab in the middle of our book. Actually, in fact, I'm turned here, right? Is the book of Proverbs, and Proverbs is all about wisdom. As a staff, we've been going through Tim Keller's book on wisdom and through the book of Proverbs, and he kind of details out what wisdom is, what discernment is, and then what discretion is, right? And I just have to retrieve it real quickly, but discernment, wisdom of course is being able to decide what's good and what's bad, but discernment is deciding between what's good, better, and best. And then discretion is if you have a vision for something, like how do you actually accomplish that vision, right? So I could decide, hey, what's best for my life is through discernment is, I want to be I want to work for Amazon. Well, discretion will now help me as a to get there, to get to that point. So because there's so many paths to get there, to become an Amazon worker, right? But discretion is the avenue by which you now try to build that plan. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because a lot of things are not black and white. They're not cut and dry. And so like Esther was saying, like there's so many positive things to social media. And so there's good reasons to keep it around. But if for you personally, you feel like after a time of discernment, after a time of discretion, you feel like, man, I've got to cut this out, then hey, like that's something that you're feeling called to. And maybe it's the Spirit that's prompting you to do that. And maybe that's something you need to pray about, discern, and then maybe come to the conclusion that, hey, I'm going to cut it out completely. Now, the reason why I personally don't do it completely is because, well, we have our, I want to connect with our church people. I want to be able to see what our church people are doing, especially during COVID. And so this is one of the reasons why I've decided to stay on. But that's where I put in these I turned off all the notifications, right? There are these other things that I'm building in to help me not be controlled by this machine. So, but yeah, it's up to you. And that's what Christian freedom is all about, right? Christ died for you, so you're free. You could do these things. He's not going to give you 1,000 lists of commandments for you to do now. It's up to you to live your life in a way that's worthy, right? Worthy of God. Live your lives as a living sacrifice. Romans 12, right? That's what Esther was alluding to, right? Live your lives as a living sacrifice. So, yeah, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's how I would go about it.
Yeah, that was really helpful, especially like your differences between like discernment and stuff. So thank you for that. I think actually that's like all of our questions, and it's like perfectly timed at 9:15. So Ashley will also close in prayer, and then that'll be it for tonight.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank both you, Esther, and Pastor Eric for speaking and really like sharing and informing us. And so it was like a really good time. I think we like all enjoyed it. And yeah, I'll close us in prayer. Dear Lord, I just thank you for this time we had to just really hear about Esther's experience with social media and just hear a message from Pastor Eric. I just pray that we would just really be able to take these things that we learned today and apply them in our own lives and really apply our convictions into ways that we can better understand our own faith and others' emotions. So I thank you, Lord. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Yay.
Thank you, Ashley, for reading the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thanks,
It's
Ashley.
really good.
Hey, thanks, guys, so much for having me.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having
thank you.
Peace through at you.
Yeah, but hope you guys have a good weekend. And
Yeah, you too. Have a good weekend, guys.
See you guys.
Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. Man, we couldn't be more excited for the year to come. Make sure to follow our Instagram page or join our Facebook group to make sure that you stay connected to all things ConXion. Bye.